less I have to do in the minute moment.
Start the meeting officially, and then Lori, at your discretion, you can call us to order, and I will turn off my camera. Hi, Sophia. Sophia, can you go up to file
Denise, you want to ask?
She can hear you. Can you unmute yourself and say hello?
Hello.
Okay, it's 5:30, so I will go ahead and start.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good evening. We are the Creeks Restoration and Water Quality Improvement Citizens Advisory Committee, and I'm calling our meeting of Wednesday, August 19th to order. And I'd like to begin with a roll call. So would you please conduct that, Jennifer?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Chair Gaskin,
Present.
Ms. Weber,
Present.
Ms. Owens,
Present.
Ms. Rizzo Centino,
Present.
Ms. Silva, Ms. Silva, are you there?
Present. Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to, before we move on to item number 3 in our agenda, I'd like to formally welcome Sophia Silva to our committee. This is your first meeting as an official committee member, and we warmly welcome you. This is a wonderful committee to be on, and we do a lot of significant and important things to help the city of Santa Barbara and our environment. So please welcome. We're glad you're here. And I'd like to move on with approval of the minutes from February 19th, 2020. Sophia, you will probably have to, what's the word I'm looking for, you guys? It's just going out of my brain.
Abstain.
Abstain.
Abstain, thank you very much. Yeah. But
Sophia
is there a motion to...
Sorry, Sophia was in attendance in February, so this is her.
Oh, second. Is this your second meeting? Okay.
Yes, it is.
So sorry. I'm very sorry. It's been a long time. Okay. So is there an approval, motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Betsy. In a second.
I'll second those.
Thank you, Sophia. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
So
Any opposition?
And
Since
I'll
we're
abstain
voting-
because I was absent.
Penny will abstain and I'll vote yay.
since we're voting, I'm going to go ahead and just read through the roll again so everyone
Okay.
can get their vote in. So Chair Gaskin,
Yes.
Ms. Weber,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Abstain?
Ms. Rizzo Centino,
Aye.
Ms. Silva,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Gaskin, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to let you know that Councilmember Snedden, our council liaison, is also here.
Excellent. Welcome, Councilmember Snedden. And I'm assuming you're on by audio.
I've made her a panelist so she can join in.
Got it. Thank you. I'll turn to George Johnson. George, are there any agenda adjustments?
No, there are not.
Okay. Then we move into public comment. Is there any public comment that we have?
So at this time, if we have anyone who would like to comment on an item not on the agenda, please use the raise your hand icon. Otherwise, if you're here to comment on an agendized item, please wait until that item. And I don't see any attendees raising their hand at the moment, so I think we are okay to move on.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do we have any comments under agenda item number 6 from any committee member or staff communication that lies outside of the agenda items?
I have one thing, and I think I'm going to
Please.
let Liz say it because she knows it better than I do.
Sorry, I've got Andrea Martinez Cohen is also on the line. I'm trying to bump her up to a panelist as well. But I did want to let you know that our 21st annual Creek Week is coming up. That is scheduled for September 19th through 26th. And so, of course, this year will be a little bit different than previous years, but we are working on a really fun week full of educational activities. Community members can visit sbcreekweek.com or on Facebook, follow us at SB Creek Week. To find out more information and keep in touch and see what's happening. So look for more info to come on that.
Thank you so much, Liz. And you also publicize that, the activities, right, in our local press?
Yes, so we do run the full schedule in the Independent, in Coastal View News, some other local papers, and radio and TV ads. So hopefully people will hear all about it.
Sounds great. Thank you so much. That's always a great event. So thank you.
Thanks.
George, any further items or committee members?
No, there's nothing else, no other announcements at this time.
Okay. All right, we'll move on to business items, and we have one business item, and it is 7A, proposed amendments to post-construction requirements in the city's stormwater discharge permit. And George, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Well, today we're going to talk about those proposed amendments to the city's stormwater requirements, and this is for new development as well as redevelopment. Next slide, please. We're going to start off with a little background. We'll discuss what non-point source urban pollution is a little. It's a problem that is evolved incrementally as the city is developed, as the open areas have become urbanized. We've covered them with concrete and roads and buildings and things like that. And when that runs off, it creates pollutant. I mean, it washes pollutants such as bacteria, hydrocarbons, pesticides, fertilizers, things like that into the water, into the creeks, and ultimately into the ocean. And that has created beach warnings and closures in the past. There are potential public health issues, definitely impacts the aquatic environment, and tourism is impacts to tourism when the beaches are closed or where there's warnings is potential result, as well as fines for, we can get regulatory fines for not, for exceeding the pollutant standards. Right now, all the creeks and beaches in the city of Santa Barbara are designated as impaired, and what that means is they exceed federal standards for human contact and for or recreational contact, sorry, and for the aquatic environment. So that's where we really exceed. We have a stormwater management program that is a requirement of the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board. And the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board basically implements the Federal Clean Water Act for the state in our area. And so one of their requirements is that we have a stormwater management program to try to improve water quality over time within the city. That program has been in place since 2008. It requires things such as inspection enforcement of illicit discharges and dumpings, outreach and education on water quality monitoring and research. And what we're going to be talking about today is part of that stormwater management program, which is the requirement that development capture and treat stormwater, and this is referred to as post-construction requirements, or PCRs. Next slide, please. So post-construction requirements, in general, they're an important tool for creek and ocean water quality. The problem, as I described before, was created incrementally as the cities urbanized in this area, and it's going to be solved incrementally through redevelopment. We do have successful ways to build now that doesn't create polluted runoff from that development. And so the idea is that as the city redevelops, it will implement those new approaches to treating stormwater on site, and that eventually the water will get cleaned up. And so these requirements basically require development projects to do that, and it is an important tool for us in the long term to improve creek and ocean water quality. It has an advantage of treating it at its source, and it's nice because it's not a requirement that the whole city has to do it once. It's based on redevelopment, and that's slower, and so is not as burdensome to the community because it happens at a more measured pace. It is also necessary for the regulatory compliance. As I said, the Regional Water Quality Control Board requires us to have these post-construction rules in place. And all these rules or requirements are detailed in what's called the city's Stormwater BMP Technical Guidance Manual, or TGM for short. Next slide, please. The Technical Guidance Manual defines the PCRs, or these post-construction requirements. The two primary tasks of this guidance manual. It's a 400+ page document. The PCRs are a small portion of it, or the actual requirements. Most of it is the technical assistance that provides guidance on how to comply with the requirements. It was created in 2008 by Geosyntec Consultants. At that time, it had extensive public review, including all the city's design review boards and a bunch of the city departments and staff, as well as stakeholders. It's been in place since 2008, but it was adopted into the city's Municipal Code in 2013 by the City Council, and then it was approved in the city's updated local coastal plan in 2019. Next slide. So today, what we're talking about is, we've gone over some of the background, but what we're focusing in on today is the city staff working with the development community and the environmental community and other other departments within the city has started a process to amend the city's technical guidance manual. It's been in place for about 10 years, and there were some areas that we saw, as well as the development community, to improve the technical guidance manual. Now, the goals was to improve it and to make it more fair, more flexible, and more effective, but at the same time to try to balance water quality treatment. We wanted to keep the same water quality treatment we have with the existing regulations as with these new requirements in the city's technical guidance manual. So really, we're trying to balance what we have already and make some improvements so that it is more fair and flexible, but that it's still we still get the same improvements to water quality. This requires an amendment to the back, please. It requires an amendment to the city's stormwater management permit. It requires an amendment to the municipal code, as well as the local coastal plan. So it's a pretty long administrative process. First, we go to city council. After the CAC provides recommendations, we'll be going to city council. If city council approves the amendments, or whatever form of amendments they do approve, that will go to the regional board. The regional board will then hear it, and if they approve it, it will come back to city council, and they will approve those final amendments, as well as changes to the municipal code. And then it has to go to for it to apply to the coastal zone, it has to go to the coastal commission, and then city council again has to see it and approve those changes to an amendment to the local coastal plan. So it is rather a long administrative process, but that's what it involves. Right now, again, we're just talking about the proposed amendments to the technical guidance manual, and they have been provided to you. They're explained some in the staff report, but there is a large spreadsheet that goes over the various changes to the technical guidance manual, or the PCRs, the requirements, as well as a list of exemptions. Next slide, please. So we want to go over this amendment process, what we've been going through in the last 18 months to make amendments to the technical guidance manual or PCRs. And it first started back in late 2018. We met with council members, design professionals, environmental organizations to get input on ways we could improve the manual. We hired a technical consultant, Geosyntec, the people that wrote the manual originally, to help us with some more of the technical components of the manual. We got the rest of the departments in the city to assist us also with the revisions. And then throughout 2019, we worked with the design community and environmental community through letters and meetings and emails to incorporate their concerns in the amended document. We revised we came up with the amendments and posted the revised technical guidance manual at the beginning of 2020, February 2020. We then held 2 public meetings in March of 2020 to discuss the amendments. And then we recently had a planning commission hearing on July 23rd to also discuss the amendments and get recommendations from the planning commission. Next slide, please. So the idea, there are 3 kind of major things that are being changed as part of the technical guidance manual. The manual itself is a rather large document. So the first major component was just to reorganize it, not so much text changes, but reorganizing the document so that it would be easier to use and more user-friendly. One of the big parts we did change are the requirements for the tier, or we're proposing to change, are the requirements for the tier thresholds. And then the third major area in the requirements that were changed within the manual is the list of exemptions. So we're going to go over right now the thresholds, and it can get a little complicated, but hopefully you guys can understand. So we're trying to simplify these tier thresholds. The existing system has 3 tiers. The proposed has 4 tiers. And the real complication with the existing system is that the tiers are dependent on land use type, geographic location, permit process, and project size. In order to simplify them and make them easier to use and understand for applicants, we are proposing to make the tiers dependent only on project size. Next slide. So proposed tier 1, we'll go over these proposed requirements right now. The tier 1 requirements are very simple. They're for projects that are anywhere from 0 to 499 square feet. And they require you to do small and inexpensive landscaping improvements such as rain barrels. We want to point out that most development projects in Santa Barbara will qualify as either tier 1 or tier 2 requirements. Next slide, please. Tier 2 requirements, they're a little different than the current tier 2 requirements. They require volumetric treatment, and these apply to projects that are anywhere from 500 square feet to 1,999 square feet. Volumetric treatment means that you have to treat a certain amount of runoff coming off of the development or the property. And in the case of tier 2 projects, the treatment is only for impervious areas that are new or replaced on the parcel, not the existing impervious areas on the parcel, but only new or replaced. In tier 3, you have to treat the entire parcel or all the impervious area on the parcel. The other major difference in tier 2 is you can treat any portion of the impervious area that you choose, and we'll go over that and explain that a little more later. It requires minimal calculations and no stormwater reports, and the treatment, that volumetric treatment, is a 1-inch storm event, and so you have to treat the volume of water for a 1-inch storm event. And that's because about 80% of the storms that come through Santa Barbara are 1 inch or less in size. And so that type of treatment ends up preventing polluted water in most rain events from getting into our creeks and oceans. So next slide, please. Proposed Tier 3 requirements, they also treat the 1-inch storm event, but on these parcels, you have to, in these projects, you have to treat the entire parcel. Now, the tier threshold is being changed for Tier 3. It's currently at 500 square feet for a large portion of the city. It's now being moved up to 2,000 square feet. The requirements themselves for Tier 3 are not substantially different. You treat the entire parcel. One big difference that we've included to try to incorporate some flexibility is the 95% rule. In other words, right now, you have to treat 100% of the impervious area on the parcel, and sometimes that can be difficult with small areas on the parcel that are due to unusual grade or just their location. Now you only have to treat it in the proposal, you'd only have to treat 95% of the impervious area. So that allows people a little flexibility in meeting the Tier 3 requirements. We want to recognize that by changing this, lowering or raising the threshold, that will reduce the amount of water quality or amount of water treated as part of the program. But as we said, we tried to carefully balance the treatment between the existing requirements and the new and the proposed requirements. But in order to balance that so that we get the same level of water quality, we've included the Tier 4 as a way to increase the amount of water treated so that we're in rough approximation with the current existing program. Next slide, please. You can see in this map, this is the existing Tier 3 requirements. Everywhere in red, it's 500 square feet. And what I just talked about in Tier 3 is that we're raising the thresholds or proposing to raise the thresholds from 500 square feet to 2,000 square feet. That would be for, so right now in those areas in red, if you have a project that's over 500 square feet, and those are the hillside design districts, the commercial districts, and the coastal zone, you are required to meet the Tier 3 requirements. If you're in the blue area on the map, then and you have a project, the threshold for the Tier 3 requirements is 4,000 square feet. So that's not really, in order to improve the fairness of the system, we are proposing that we have the same development size requirement for the entire city. One thing to point out is that in those blue areas, most of those are residential areas with, more landscaping, and they tend to be flatter than the other parts of the city in red. So those actually are easier to treat, and they tend to be more effective because you have larger areas of landscape, and typically most of the BMPs are done in the landscaped area. So anyway, we do think we'll get more effective treatment in those blue areas, and it will be less expensive typically for the applicant. Next slide. So the proposal is to, in the blue areas, is to make the entire city all the same for Tier 3. And so you can see that the entire city is all now blue. And that requirement, again, is 2,000 square feet for Tier 3. That's what's being proposed. Right now, it is 500 square feet in the red areas and 4,000 in the blue areas. And to make it consistent and more fair throughout the city, the proposal is to change that to 2,000 square feet for a Tier 3 threshold for the entire city. Next slide. Here's an example of an existing home. Next slide. This is for existing Tier 3 requirements. You do a 575 square foot addition. Next slide, please. If you're in the areas in red in the map currently, you would have to treat all the hardscape on your parcel. Next slide, please. If you were in the blue area, then you wouldn't have to treat anything on your parcel because your development is only 575 square feet, so it does not meet that large 4,000 square foot threshold. Next slide. Now we're going to use this kind of same schematic to go over the proposed Tier 2 requirements. We talked about that they're required for 500 size projects. Tier 3 is 2,000 or over. Tier 2 is 500 to 1,999. So for a Tier 2 project, if you were to propose a 575 square foot addition, as in this in this example, you would only treat that 575 square feet of new or replaced impervious area. Next slide. And in this case, that's what you would treat right there. So you could treat it, you could treat the actual water coming off of the addition itself. Next slide. You could treat it off of the garage. You just, the point here is that you have to treat only the square footage in Tier 2 projects of the area that you are, of your new and replaced impervious area. So if it was easier for you to use the garage and you could get better treatment or less expensive, you could do it on the garage. Next slide. You might choose to do it on the front of the house. Next slide. Or you might choose to do it on the driveway. It's up to the applicant, but it provides them a lot more flexibility because they can do the treatment wherever it works best on their parcel. They just have to do an equal size of treatment to what they are developing, what their new development is. Next slide. The proposed Tier 4 requirements that I mentioned earlier, these are applying to large development projects of 15,000 square feet or larger. Typically in the city, we see about 2 or 3 of these a year. So there aren't a lot of these projects, but they do cover large areas and do, if they are untreated, contribute a lot of water to, potentially polluted water to the system. So the proposed requirements are to retain 1.2 inches of runoff. I spoke about this earlier. Tier 3 and Tier 2, you treat 1 inch of runoff from your impervious areas. For Tier 4, that's raised to 1.2 inch, and you need to retain that water on site. And that's for all areas that have existing impervious surfaces. For those areas that are vacant or landscaped on your lot, the requirement goes up to 2.4 inches for those areas. This is consistent with the city Central Coast PCR requirements. And again, these higher requirements for Tier 4 offset the higher Tier 3 threshold. The increased, yeah. So next slide. Here's an example of Tier 4 project, maybe typical for a downtown area where you have about 90% of the lot or so covered in impervious surfaces and you have a little bit of landscaping. Next slide, please. If you were to take that parcel that we just saw and redevelop it and cover it with cover the entire site, lot line to lot line, with impervious surfaces like parking lots and buildings and driveways. This is an example of what you'd be required to do. So for all the blue areas, you would have to retain 1.2 inches of rainfall for that square footage of the area. And then for the yellow areas, you would have to retain 2.4 inches of runoff. So that's the difference. And you can see there that in the yellow areas are smaller, but they're a higher requirement. If you didn't develop the entire lot and you left those areas landscaped, you would just have to do the 1.2 requirement for your redeveloped area. But again, if you cover those the areas that are currently pervious with new development, then you will have to treat a higher volume of water for the square footage of those vacant areas. Next slide. As I said, there was kind of 3 things that were changed: the formatting of the technical guidance manual, the tiers, and some requirements for the tiers, and then the exemptions. And so we did make quite a few changes to the exemptions. There are a total of 23 exemptions. We changed the maintenance and repair exemptions, included re-roofing projects as part of the exemptions, driveways over 15% slopes, shared driveways, and minor work in the public right-of-way. We do want to mention that we're still working with city staff on some minor tweaks to the language in the public, the work in the public right-of-way exemption, but we will have that completed prior to going to city council. And then the last exemption is that 5% of the tier 3 impervious area I mentioned earlier, or the opposite is that is you only have to treat 95% of the lot rather than the whole 100%. So it gives you an exemption for 5% of the area. Next slide, please. So when we worked with the development community extensively on these amendments, and we were able to include most of their requests in the amendments that we are currently, the proposed amendments that are currently you're hearing right now. But there were some additional comments that were provided by the development community prior to our scheduled planning commission hearing that was going to occur back in April of 2020. We delayed that until July so that we could investigate these and address some of these comments. And so we're going to discuss each of these comments as there's 5 different ones as we go through. You'll see what they are, and we'll discuss each one in detail. The first one is the request was we have proposed to increase tier 3 threshold from 500 to 2,000 square feet. And their request was to increase that even more to 2,500 square feet. And we chose 2,000 square feet because, again, that's where we could balance the existing treatment of water. Maintain the same level of water quality treatment for the existing program as the proposed program. And as well as that 2,000 square feet is a pretty big project. It's about $1 million, so that we were trying in the design of these tiers to make things proportional. A small project under 500 square feet, you don't have to do very much. And small to medium, the 500 to 2,000 square feet, you have to do a little more. After 2,000 square feet, you do more for tier 3, and then tier 4, you even do more. So it's kind of proportional to the water quality treatment requirements are proportional to the size of the project. And what we want to point out here is that by raising the threshold from 2,000 to 2,500 square feet, it's basically that will reduce the amount of water quality treated. That's all there is to it, because there'll be fewer tier 3 projects. And tier 3 projects, again, if you remember, they treat the entire parcel, not just the new development. Tier 2 only treats the new development, and again, that helps with not making things worse, but it doesn't really make things better, because tier 3 treats the old development, and that's where we really get improvements in water quality. So by raising the threshold to 2,500, it will take us longer to improve water quality, and we'll get reduced water quality compared to our existing program. We want to point out that we did include some exemptions that do make it easier for tier 3, that 5% impervious area, as well as some of those exemptions that help projects to either get under the threshold or have reduced requirements for treatment if they do go over the threshold. Next slide, please. The second comment was to exclude State Street and downtown from tier 4 requirements. Now, this comment was made prior to a change that staff, after we received this comment, we went back and looked at the tier 4 requirements, and we found out that the regional board actually had a clause in there that allowed you, our original proposal was that anything over 15,000 square feet that was in the tier 4 category would have to would have to retain 2.4 inches, a 2.4 inch rain event, and that's quite a bit of water. So that was the development community is worried, especially in the downtown area, as to how they would do that. So we went back and we were able to revise it because that's consistent with the regional board's PCRs, And that only requires you to do 1.2 inch for the impervious areas. And because the downtown areas most of the lots are developed with impervious surfaces, either parking or alleyways or walkways or buildings themselves. For most of those projects in the downtown area, the treatment requirement will only be 1.2 inch retention. And that is a little bit more than tier 3, but again, it's part of that proportional treatment. As you get larger, you do more treatment. And it helps us to balance and maintain our water quality protection. Next slide. Yes, thank you. So we also included a waiver process. They also requested inclusion of a waiver process, and we currently do have a waiver process in our program, and it can be done for technical or legal infeasibility. The regional board actually doesn't have a waiver process in their PCRs. So this is actually better than their system, and at least for applicants, because the waivers don't give you complete. You don't get you can't completely get out of the requirements for water quality treatment, but we can waive a portion of those requirements, and that's advantageous, because in the regional boards regulations, if you don't do treatment on your site, you're required to demonstrate compliance offsite, which can be very expensive and administratively difficult. So we think our waiver process, current waiver process, is a good one, and we don't think at this point, we don't recommend that we make any changes to that. Next slide, please. The appeal process was another request by the development community to include appeal process, and we at this point we want to point out that an appeal process could be implemented, but that you cannot there isn't a way for an applicant to be exempted from the actual requirements themselves. So if for some reason during an appeal process, a review board was to say you're exempt from this particular requirement because of conditions at your site, the regional board doesn't accept that. They look at that as a permit violation, and so that would create liability for the city. The regional board itself does not have an appeal process in any of their PCRs or in any of the communities that they regulate. So we don't recommend including that as at this time as part of the amendments. The last major comment they had was to develop an in lieu fee program. We don't recommend that for the city of Santa Barbara, simply because we've done quite a bit of investigation around the state to try to find a successful in lieu fee program that we could model after. And we were not able to find any anywhere in the state. And that's because they're just very difficult to develop and implement successfully. And many of the barriers you can see there, the high fees associated with them. It's a very lengthy process to develop and get them approved by the regional board, requires additional staffing to both develop and manage. And there's just long delays. There can be long delays between when you actually have enough funds to when you collect enough funds to when you actually construct a regional project to do the treatment as part of the in lieu fee program. So in lieu fee basically means that you pay into this, pay into a program, and then you don't have to build any of the water quality treatment facilities for your particular parcel. Again, we've looked at San Francisco and Santa Monica's program, and none of them, and in Paso Robles, and we just have not found, and all around the state, we just have not found anything that is successful. So we don't recommend trying to develop one at this time. Next slide. We did just recently go to the Planning Commission. So to outline the steps again, we went to the Planning Commission to receive comments in July. We're now at the Creeks Advisory Committee. Once we receive your recommendations, or we receive recommendations from the Planning Commission, once we receive the CAC recommendations, we will go to City Council, and that's tentatively scheduled for September 22nd of next month. And then we will go to the regional board with whatever amendments the City Council approves. Prior to the meeting with the Planning Commission on the 23rd, we received comments from the environmental community concerning the amendments to the PCRs, and we just wanted to quickly go over those. There were 12 local environmental organizations that submitted comments. They support the amendments to the PCRs as proposed, and they strongly urge the city not to adopt additional exemptions, waivers, and appeal processes requested by the development community. The city risks violating its stormwater permit by granting additional concessions beyond the originally proposed amendments. And they said to avoid any additional modifications to the stormwater permit that would weaken water quality protections. Next slide. So those comments were received by the PC, and we did a similar presentation at the Planning Commission on July 23rd. And they had, the Planning Commission provided the following recommendations. I won't read all of it, but they supported the tiers 1, 2, and 3, but asked to raise the threshold for tier 3 from 2,000 to 2,500 square feet. They recommended inclusion of a waiver process and an appeal process, recommended elimination of a public right-of-way exemption. They included some additional language, as you can see there. And then they recommended that for tier 4, there be some type of in lieu fee program or offsite mitigation program developed for that, for the central business district and priority housing overlay area. Next slide. So today, you guys are charged with the providing a recommendation to the City Council on the proposed amendments to the city's stormwater discharge permit. And again, those proposed amendments are what are outlined in the staff report and outlined in the table that the large table you got that identifies all of the changes to the requirements, as well as the list of amendments. I mean, a list of exemptions. Next slide, please. Now, real quickly, we're going to go over the landscaping. I just wanted to show you, just for people's education, what these different techniques for improving and treating water quality look like. So this first one is just a downspout that's directed to the landscaping. Next slide. The next one is similar to that. It's a flow spreader where you try to spread the flow out from your downspouts throughout your landscaped area. Next slide. Similar to that is a rainwater garden, but it's a little larger. Next slide. Rain barrels, those are pretty inexpensive ways that you can help treat some of the stormwater from your site. Next slide. Above ground cisterns, those can be used in areas where you have constrained sites or where you can't infiltrate water. Next slide. Even plant-contained planters can help treat water. Vegetated swales. Next slide. Parking lots. Same thing with roadside swales, very similar technology or technique. Next slide. You can have bioretention basins. Those are kind of depressed areas that water flows from parking lots or hardscape to. Next slide. Infiltration basins. Next slide. It's a larger version of that. And then planter boxes. Next slide. Green roofs. Next slide. Dry extended basins. So this is another technique, a little different landscape look. And then wet retention basins. That's where they're wet all the time and they retain all the water that flows on. And then ribbon driveways, they help treat water and infiltrate. Same thing with permeable asphalt and concrete. Next slide. Grass pavers, same kind of idea with using a different look, different materials. Next slide. Gravel, same thing. And then permeable pavers, which most people are familiar with. So that concludes my presentation. We're available for questions.
George, thank you so much. I think I speak for all the members. That was very thorough, and it was a well-organized and excellent presentation. So I thank you for the time and effort you have put into that. And I particularly appreciate the latter part where you're demonstrating the permissible ways to capture or treat or retain the water on site. So thank you. Committee members, are there any questions? If you could unmute your mic if you have a question. Any questions? I don't see. I would like to make a comment. I very much appreciate the work that the Creeks Division has done over this decade, has it been, to really focus in on stormwater quality and to positively impact the outcome of that to the benefit of the entire community. And we annually receive reports about stormwater quality and the progress that we're making. And these regulations and measures seem to consistently and formidably help us in this regard. I personally think that the refined thresholds are very attuned to the reality on the ground, and I appreciate staff's focus on that, particularly the refinement in Tier 2 and Tier 3. I appreciate the alignment with project size. It just makes a lot of sense when you're putting something on the ground that it's related to something as tangible as project size and not a compilation or an amalgamation of a calculus. And then finally, I think it's a well thought out and well reasoned approach to providing some revisions, necessary revisions and updates to the process. So I appreciate staff's thoughtful approach to this.
Thank you.
So questions, comments from the committee? Any questions or comments?
I did have a question. This is Penny.
Yes. Yes, Penny.
George, or Chair, it was more just a clarification on the one of the requests for by the Planning Commission about the changes to the public right-of-way exemption. I just was unclear what they
wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Madam Chair and committee members. So the idea, I was at the Planning Commission, the idea behind that was that the Planning Commissioners felt that the private parcels or private sector was being treated differently than the public sector, and they wanted to remove that exemption so that it would be equal. But in reality, the exemption, the whole reason for the exemption was to make it equal. Our goal with these requirements is to make it consistent that the public projects are treated the same as private projects. So that exemption didn't really favor public projects, but that's the way it was interpreted. So that's why it was removed, because they felt it was giving an unfair advantage to public projects. But in reality, it was there to provide the same requirements for both public and private. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it leveled the playing field for public and private.
Yes,
level.
it was the same. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Thank you, Penny. Any other comments? Here, Betsy, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I really appreciate all the work on this as well. It seems much simplified and a lot easier to follow, just basing it on project size while still providing some flexibility. So just really appreciate your work on it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betsy. I certainly second that. If there are no comments, and I keep looking to the side because I keep monitoring the committee, but if there are none, then I would entertain a motion that supports staff's. I'm sorry, Liz.
Chair Gaskin, sorry, we need to do public comment. We do have some
Thank you.
callers.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
I will let everyone know that Andrea Martinez Cohen, our Parks and Recreation Commission liaison, is here. Just letting you know, she's on the call as well. Anyone who is tuning in that would like to make a public comment on this item, please use the raise your hand function, and we will call on you. At that time, please unmute yourself, and you will have 2 minutes to speak. We do have a screen up on the presentation right now showing you how to use that function. So I see we have Benjamin Pitterly. Mr. Pitterly, I have unmuted you. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and you will have 2 minutes.
Thanks. Can you all hear me? Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So I'm Ben Pitterly. I'm with Santa Barbara Channel Keeper. 2 minutes. Okay, I'm commenting tonight to encourage the committee to recommend that City Council approve the modifications to this program as currently drafted by staff. So we took the opportunity to comment before the Planning Commission last month. We were dismayed, frankly, that the commission chose to recommend essentially approving all the things that seem to add flexibility by reducing environmental protections while recommending to delay and weaken the elements that staff proposed to maintain current levels of protection. And so, I mean, these requirements require treatment, but that often means infiltrating stormwater into the ground whenever possible. And this cuts to the heart of true integrated water management, which is what the city and municipalities all throughout the state are pursuing. And members from the development community challenge staff to produce evidence of water quality benefits, which can be extremely challenging, as you all know, without a very robust and costly long-term monitoring program in place specifically for that purpose. But infiltration of stormwater or low impact development, it isn't even just about preventing pollution. There are broad benefits to changing how we manage stormwater in this way, and those benefits include reduced localized flooding risk, water supply and conservation benefits, and even importantly, restoring shallow groundwater supplies in some areas so we can keep our creeks flowing as much as possible through the dry season. It's all connected, and the only way to get there is over time, project by project, until the urban landscape's been largely retrofitted, and that takes time. You need an effective program. I've heard one last point, I've heard the Development Community and Planning Commission cite our need for affordable housing as a conflict with these water quality protections, and we don't buy that, frankly. It's one thing to say that, but have affordable housing projects actually been derailed by these requirements? I don't think that's been demonstrated, and if there is a conflict, that's valid for sure, but why not tailor the program to provide flexibilities for true affordable housing opportunities, which should be simple to figure out rather than push forward things that strip protections away from every category. For example, raising tier 3 threshold from 2,000 to 2,500. That's what's being advocated, and that's not about affordable housing. So Santa Barbara, it should be leading the region for this type of program and not chasing the minimum. So we asked the committee to recommend that staff's original proposal to be adopted by City Council. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to make a comment, please use the raise your hand function. Mr. Oxner, I'm going to unmute you and go ahead. You'll have 2 minutes.
Oh, yes. Hi, I'm Tom Oxner, and I am representing the American Institute of Architects on this matter. We have been working with Creeks Department for quite some time to try to stabilize the program and bring it more in line with proportionality in terms of the net effects of the costs associated with the projects at hand. And I want to thank Creeks for their improvements, we feel, to the program. And I know it took a big effort to get that this far. And we just want to emphasize that there is still work to do. Specifically, I know I don't have much time. I see the ticker going. I have a lot to say, but I'm just going to hit them hard here. So you've got the increase from 2,000 to 2,500 is definitely necessary. The point of the changes of this program, I think, missed the mark in the sense that they're just redistributing the same amount of work over different thresholds of scope of work. So I'm going to jump to tier 4. Tier 4, I think, is the big hot button here. Tier 4 is really targeted at larger projects. Tier 4 is really untested. It is a program that applies a standard approach to large projects, but it uses a higher threshold. And if we apply it to our downtown area, it includes retention, and we have a high water table, and it really needs to be thought through more carefully before we put it in effect. Back in 2008, nobody thought that this program was really going to have the kind of effect that it ultimately had. And I feel like right now we're at the doorstep of doing the same thing if we do not look hard at tier 4. And 100% we need an appeals process. Civil engineers just don't seem to see eye to eye with the administrators of this within the Creeks Department. I think that needs to be dealt with because it's been so frustrating for homeowners and architects alike. So
Thank you, Mr. Oxner. Do we have any other community members who would like to make a comment? Okay, I see Jason Gotsis. Jason, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and unmute yourself and you will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Jason Gotsis. I'm with Ashley Advance, and we've been working with Tom Oxner and the AIA committee and with Creeks. And again, we appreciate the work they've done in helping, again, move this forward and make improvements where we can. And again, I'm picking up the baton where Tom left off on the tier 4, and that's a real concern. Infiltration in the downtown corridor where you have 0 lot lines, foundation issues, pavements that again are just not amenable to infiltration and saturation of the surface, or I'm sorry, of the geotechnical the soils, and destabilizes foundations and pavements. So again, we just would like to have that tier 4 looked at strongly. And again, if there's a maximum extent practical, infeasibility requirements, something that we can do, perhaps just treatment only, we would like to consider that, as opposed to trying to force 1.2 inches of water, 2.4 inches of water into a city block. So again, thank you for your time. And again, tier 4 really has to be looked at.
Thank you. Do we have anyone else who would like to comment? Please use the raise your hand function if you would like to comment on this item. Madam Chair, it doesn't seem like anyone else would like to submit comments, so I think that is it.
Thank you so much to all those who did make public comment. Appreciate that. I will entertain a motion that we receive, and if we have any recommendations, provide the recommendations. I would like to suggest, having heard none through our comment, to reach out to the committee members, see if there's any other comment post-public comment, otherwise that we support the revisions as presented by staff. And I would like to make a part B to that, if it's amenable to the committee, that we urge that the water quality protections in place are not weakened with any revisions that go forward. So any thoughts? Is there a motion to that effect? Penny?
Yeah, thanks for that, Lori. I would second that that motion. I know Creek staff has spent a lot of time and energy and effort working with the community to develop these proposed amendments, and we want to ensure that water quality is protected. So
Thank you, Penny. And I'm actually going to make you the maker of the motion because I can't make a motion. So are you
right.
comfortable with that?
Yes.
Okay. So now we need a second. And
I'll
Betsy.
second I'll second that.
Betsy seconds. Thank you so much. Penny moves, Betsy seconds, and it's open for discussion. The motion to accept and support the recommendations to revise the stormwater regulations as presented, and to urge that in this process that no water quality protections are weakened by this. Any comments? Sophia, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to say that I thought the whole presentation and the new proposal is really well thought out. And thank you to George for an excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Okay. Roll call, please, for the vote.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and repeat the recommendation?
Certainly. That the committee receives and supports the recommendations for proposed amendments to the post-construction requirements in the city's stormwater discharge permit process, and that we urge that water quality protections are not weakened through this revision process.
Okay. And a vote by Chair Gaskin.
Aye.
Ms. Weber,
Aye.
Ms. Owens,
Aye.
Ms. Rizzo Santino,
Aye.
and Ms. Silva.
Aye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, committee. George, anything else before we adjourn?
Nope, nothing else on the agenda.
Okay, thank you. And we will have a next meeting in the month of September, and I will adjourn the meeting. Thanks, staff, very much for this. It went very smoothly. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.